Thank you for sticking around. For Lucky Last, Neil has very kindly agreed to. He drove all the way from Sydney for this this event, and he's also doing a workshop tomorrow. But just by way of introduction, there's some moments in your life when you're running a team, and then someone comes along, and you think, "Wow, I really lucked out there. I've got to make the most of them because they're going to disappear really quick." So Neil had been working in the UK for 20 years, 15 years.
Yeah, 20.
And then came here. I was at Monash. He came to work as the photographer at Monash for a year, and then went back into newspapers. Most recently, he's been the head of visual storytelling at News Corp, also the head photographer for all of News. Also before that, the head photographer for all of AAP. He's just been, he was shortlisted in the National Portrait Photography Prize this year. He's won a drone prize this year. I could go on, but suffice to say, he's got a great CV, but also a great eye. And I think this is what I'm intrigued about is when we've got so many images and AI can serve up so many images, where does that take us with storytelling? Over to you, Nick.
Thanks, Tim. Hello. Do I need that? Well, anyway. Hi, everyone. I know it's a long 2 days. I hope you've had fun. I'm going to start with a video and be indulgent and show you some of my work. So bear with me. I'll just start with that and we'll talk after. So, hello everyone, I'm Neil Bennett. Isn't that music dramatic? Just when I'm on my laptop, it wasn't quite like that. And as Tim said, I've been kind of doing this 35 years and had many roles really. Recently at News Corp, as Tim said, as head of visual storytelling, but I'm now a freelance photographer who has a lot of lovely clients like Opera Australia and Sydney Dance Company, and I like working with creative people. But I must say, just putting that together, it was a kind of privilege, really, because I went through all my archive and try to get a balance of old and new. And I realized just how I needed to thank a lot of people for letting me take their picture. But I realized how collaborative it was. Being a photographer is quite lonely sometimes, but actually when you get commissioned or assigned to do something, you're in constant conversations with the commissioning person, the picture editor, the marketing director, and then the actual subject. You're constantly evolving together. And that kind of, I realized, was the basis of what this should be about, collaboration, and how you fit into that possibly, hopefully. And I always think about how the story needs to be told with the picture. I think of myself as a storyteller, not a photographer, really. Maybe. So bear with me. I've got a few slides to show you. I'm not comfortable chatting to people like this normally, so be kind, be gentle. But basically, this is how I try to write what I think about photography. And I think I'm not going to just read it out. I hate people who have decks who read word for word what's on the screen. But it is a feeling, and I think that's real. I think the way people engage in visuals, video and photography is how they feel. And I think for me, pictures particularly cut through quicker than words, quicker than having to analyze what word by word and line by line means. Pictures are visceral and they really hit you with something. And that's important to me. And as a storyteller and not just a photographer, I kind of think of this as the most important part of the story. This is a mantra I've had. I've been a photo editor, picture editor for about 15, 18 years as well. So I've managed photographers, and this is my mantra to all photographers. We don't take pictures, we make them. Now, that's not always the case. Obviously, a lot of photographers, when you work at AAP, you're going to cover events, spot news, breaking news, sport, things that are in front of you. But even in that moment for me, you're making a decision as a photographer, what lens you're using, where you're going to stand, sit. I'm always the photographer lying on the floor or climbing a wall, because your angle of view is your choice. So there is still an element of make in news and sport. And I think it's really important photographers understand that. A lot of young photographers kind of argue with me about this until they realize what it actually means. So making the picture is important. And in that storytelling aspect of how you make the picture, what you use in that making of the picture and the tools you have with you is your role in that storytelling. So lenses, light, and where you stand. They're the three things that matter. Is the photographer here? Because I saw her. I was going to talk to her about that. So I've chosen some pictures that are just, they're not the best pictures in the world. They're not the newest pictures, but they're things that tell me or enable me to tell you what's my role in this. So these are three portraits that I have shot over the years. One is a comedian, Damien Callanan, in Melbourne, and this was his comedy festival poster. We talked a lot. He brought props. The comedy producer asked for something else. I chose to stand on a ladder. The lighting's particular. There's choices being made constantly as a team in this. And it's not just a photographer making a picture. The second one, the woman in the middle's a composer. And I went to her house to photograph her, and she was really shy. She didn't like it being photographed. A lot of people don't. But I saw in her garden, she had this really old tatty swimming pool and autumnal leaves. And I said, would you consider coming out to the pool? I said, have you got anything colorful to put on? She had this bright pink jacket. It was a dream. And then we talked about what she could do. She said, I want to be full of energy. So even in that, which looks like a natural picture, it's totally contrived. It's lit. It's leaves being kicked over the camera as I lay on the floor. And then the third picture is David Tennant, who was Doctor Who at the time, and I got commissioned to shoot him for a magazine cover. And with David, he's a lovely, lovely man, and he's really quite funny. And the interviewer, the picture editor who commissioned me, said, "We want to get across that he's a funny guy, because in Doctor Who, he's going to add humor to it." And so I said, well, okay. So I sat down with him, and as soon as you point a camera at someone like an actor, they kind of perform for you. But he got very serious. He's staring down the barrel, and I was like, crumbs, this is intense. So it was for a Scottish magazine. I said, oh, do your parents still live in Paisley? I knew where they lived. I'd worked in Scotland before. He said, yeah. I said, do they get the magazine on the Saturday, the Saturday magazine of the Herald? He said, yeah, they still get that every week. I said, David, you could have had a shave. Anyway, he grabbed his chin and laughed. And I just went, and he said, that's the picture, isn't it? And I said, yeah, that's it. He's like, oh, right, okay. So it was just an example about how in the moment, the tools you have, their light, their lenses, their angle, but actually they're also, you've got to create a rapport with your subject, and all of these show that. Change of pace, sorry about this. This is really special to me because I got to go to Africa a couple of times to work, and the same rules apply. You have to tell the story, you have to think about light, you have to think about lens choice, and you have to actually be very considerate who you're taking and what their story is. So I was lucky enough to travel with a charity to Addis Ababa in Ethiopia, where 20 years after Bob Geldof had been to the same village to start Band-Aid and Live Aid, they were suffering again. So we did their story, and this is a food queue on the left. And I asked the translator to ask the woman if I could photograph her. She said yes. And in fact, the translator said she really wants you to photograph her. And I said, oh, that's a bit strange, you know. And they had realized, she said that the more pictures we can be in, the more food will get delivered by the UN. And it was really amazing to hear her, because she was so kind of human in that it was almost transactional, the process. And I felt quite bad about it, but the charity was saying, please get great pictures here, because this is where we need the food. So it was amazing. The man on the right is called Ayala. He's the village elder, and he was the most incredible man. I have his print on my wall at home, and I talk to him all the time. He's the most fantastic kind of face. And I was in his mud hut shooting the babies who had malaria, and he wanted that in the papers to get the drugs. And I said, oh, can I just take your face and your picture? And he was a bit shy, but he was fine. And again, stood him next to the window, pulled a curtain, lit him, and told his story. And I think his face is as powerful as the food queue. And they both work together, obviously. But even when you're in somewhere like Africa, you've got to, as a photographer, tell the story, not just snap away, so to speak. Another Doctor Who, which was the opposite to David Tennant, we had to show how intense he was, because before he was Doctor Who, he was Malcolm Tucker. I hope you've all seen The Thick of It. So we had to show this kind of intensity to Peter Capaldi, the actor. I'm going to go quite fast here because there's a lot to look at and talk about. And then Ricky Gervais. So Ricky was, I know he's quite a divisive character these days, but I shot this about 12 years ago, and he was probably the nicest celebrity I've ever met, to be honest. He was so humble and lovely. And I asked him to turn and laugh at me, sat on the chair, and he said, why do you want me to laugh? I said, because you have this kind of, you're known for this crazy laugh. And he said, that's not true. And we had this little row. And then I asked him to, he said, let me get into character for you. So he turned around first and said, I'm going to pretend I'm in the cinema and you're chatting behind me. So he turned around, he started pointing aggressively at me. He said, if you eat that popcorn loud, and I was going, Christ, what is he doing? I said, I just want you to laugh, Ricky. He said, all right, okay. So he turned back, and then he turned and laughed. And I said, oh, can we, I want more laughter. And he's going, what do you mean more laughter? I said, oh, why do you wear black? What's that all about? You always wear black. He said, and he looked at me, and I had a striped shirt on, you know, and I'm over 100 kilos. So he said, I can't wear stripes either. And at that point, he laughed, and I went, and that was the story I wanted. But he was taking the mickey out of me. So what? And then he asked to move his coffee cup, and I said, no, leave that there. I love the coffee cup. So at 8, I'm going to go quickly. Please interrupt if you want. Shout questions at me. Do whatever you want, please. At AAP, I had a year as head of photography there, and in that year, they were closing Uluru for the public to climb up in respect to the people of the land, the native Australians and Indigenous people. And it was really important. We recorded this. We had to get permissions to actually photograph people on Uluru, something that obviously social media was full of at the time, but actually to tell the story, the Aboriginal community had to agree to it. And we got permissions. We sent a photographer for a week to tell the story, because they were going to walk one weekend and close the next. And I was lucky at AAP to have photographers who wanted to tell stories, not just take pictures, make pictures. And Lucas Kosh, who's a wonderful photographer based in Canberra for AAP, went through the week shooting the most incredible story of the end of the walk on Uluru. And I think what he captures is tourism, Aboriginal stories, history, and he's telling the whole story. This is the handover, the park ranger shaking the hand of the Aboriginal leader, and just capturing, you know, the people that matter in this story. But I love this. The reason I'm showing you this is for the last frame, because a lot of photographers wouldn't shoot the next picture. Sorry, this picture. And this picture to me is storytelling. This sums up everything about Uluru. The walking chain, the mountain on its own, the respect. And I think in all of photography and storytelling, photographers think like this. How can I take one picture and the next, and how can I light? Where do I stand? What lens do I use? I keep going on about that. I'm awfully sorry. Is anyone here from Monash? So I shot this in Monash 12 years ago. And I chose to show this today because it's about storytelling. This is in the wind tunnel testing aerodynamics, and the cyclist was a former student who was going to cycle for charity. But it doesn't say instantly this picture's about light and movement, but that's what it is about. So the light behind her feet, I've put that light in. That's me trying to light the blue wall, the wind, the smoke coming over her helmet to show the aerodynamics. That's just invented. That isn't normally there. We got someone with a wind machine to blow that over her. So again, it's all about making the picture, and there's always more you can do. And that takes planning and logistics and teams of people to help you. And that's really my message today, is how you work with the photographer constantly. My biggest advice to you when hiring a photographer would be, get them involved early in the creative process. Find someone who you know you can trust to listen, to engage, to actually collaborate with you. I show this picture because that's the one that got used, because they didn't want the light in it. But I prefer that one, but this is the one they used. Probably Tim's fault, that. So how do you make your picture stand out? That's essentially what I'm talking about today. And Tim sent me this quote. which I think he's just trying to be naughty. But he said, look, there's this, I got this feedback from a potential student saying, oh, they all look the same. All the brochures have the smiling person on the front. And I'm sure you all recognize this, but I don't think there's a problem with this. If you've got, I mean, we're listening to Tracy just now and Joe earlier, if you've got other marketing video and campaigns where there's visuals that are different and graphs and all those things. But if you're trying to attract people, potential students, this is a problem, obviously, because they don't know who you are because you look like everyone else. So I'm going to tell you a story about, I work a lot in the arts these days, and this is about a picture where I just pushed and pushed and pushed to get a different picture. This is the photo call for Australian Ballet in the UK. They brought Swan Lake, which is a wonderful piece of ballet. It was lauded around the world, and they came to the UK, and their first place they were performing was Cardiff. I'm a Welshman, by the way. That's very important. I'm not English. So in my home, where I worked for the Millennium Centre, which is this huge opera house behind them, they said, we're going to get the 4 signets outside the opera house, and we're going to make that the kind of publicity image to sell more tickets. We had a blue sky that day, which is quite rare. That's a big thing in Wales, that blue sky. And I then, after this shoot, went to the marketing and PR team and said, why don't we try and do more than this? We have this huge lake in the middle of Cardiff full of swans. Why don't we get a ballerina on the lake? And the publicity woman, Maris, said, oh, that's a good idea. We'll get her on the boat. And I said, no, let's get her on the lake. And she was like, what do you mean, Neil? And I said, I'll get a table from IKEA. I'll cut the legs. It sits just under the water. Weight it, and I'll make it happen. And she's like, okay. She thought I was crazy. So the ballerina turned up at 6 a.m. in a fleece in her Swan Lake costume. She said, and I wasn't living in Australia. This is back in the UK. She said, what are you going to do with me, mate? And I said, we're going to get you to stand on the lake. She said, geez. Sorry about the accent. Sorry about that. And the reason I'm showing this, not just because I'm very proud of it. It's a great picture. It took probably 8 of us to make this picture. Of course, I'm the one pressing the button, but there is a park ranger on a little boat off camera here, throwing bird seed off the back to get the swans to come round. There's 2 people in a boat with a lighting her. The week before we tested the table, I stood on the table on the lake, and we took a picture of me on the table, 100 kilos, and sent it to them saying it is safe. Well, she's about 50 kilos. So this is how it looked before this. The cold ballerina at 6 a.m. My friend doing the lighting with someone driving the boat. Another boat is not in shot, is chucking the birdseed. And it took about 2 weeks, this picture, to set up. It took Cardiff City Council to agree to it. It took a lot of buy-in from Australian Ballet. I shot this picture in about 40 seconds. That's what I shot. Because as soon as the birds go and you've got the picture, you get her to pose in different poses. Hopefully you get this. And it's an example of how it takes a lot of people sometimes to collaborate and get to the picture you want. It was front page of The Guardian back in the day when newspapers really mattered. It was a big deal. But it's me trying to say it takes a lot of people sometimes. This is an example of portraiture. So this is a young pianist, a repetiteur from Opera Australia, and they wanted a simple picture of him in the rehearsal room with the piano, smiling. Done. I took this picture and I realized that about 10 years before this, that I'd shot this picture. Eddie Perfect was doing a performance with a string quartet, and he wanted to be photographed with a piano. I was commissioned to shoot Eddie. Now, I didn't remember this when I shot this, but when I was looking at these pictures, I realized I'd taken a black backdrop to isolate him. We got him to wear a black t-shirt, and we wanted him to engage with the piano. So obviously Eddie's a performer, so you get, do we all know who Eddie Perfect is? Yeah. So he's just finished Beetlejuice here, by the way, which if you didn't see it, it was wonderful. This was them saying, can we just get a quick headshot? This was the agent of Eddie going, I really need this to be a powerful image. The brief is critical in how the photographer thinks about this. If you're saying you've got 5 minutes to get a quick headshot, that's what you're going to get. If you're saying, how can we make this picture better? That's how you engage in that conversation with the photographer. Bring a backdrop. What props do we need? Is the piano clean? Does it have dust? What can Eddie do? What's his hair like? What's his t-shirt like? That happens constantly in that world. And it's really, I've never seen it quite as obvious as these two pictures, to be honest, because that's the same picture. So what do photographers think about other than the things we all think about? You know, where's the next coffee coming from? And, you know, how do I make that do that? So light, context, attention to detail. I wrote those because they're things that get lost in commissioning photography. The next one's the most important thing to me, the golden hour. It's the end one. Look, I told you they'd all be going. The golden hour is, if you don't know it, I'm sure you do, the morning light as the sun rises and the evening light as the sun sets. It is joyous. And if I was in a position to commission photographers, I would get everything shot in those 2 hours because it's your friend always. And preparation is key. And photographers, if they're good enough and you're commissioning the right ones, they will think about that constantly. What's the visual mood board you're giving them? What do I need for the shoot? What will the subject be doing for me? If you involve them early, as I said before, you can have those conversations as they're thinking about what they need to take. So outside of photographing things, I've done a lot of picture editing, a lot of nurturing young photographers, a lot of management of photography. This one event, though, to me is really special. Is anyone from Adelaide here? So I did 2 years as director of photography at the Advertiser, and it was much better back then. And one year for the festival launch, we decided to make a bit of a splash with it. So I think it was the 10-year anniversary of the garden, I think, of Earthly Delights. So I was sent the publicity pictures, which was, you know, the string quartet, although there's 5 of them, and the Zephyr Quartet, who they're fantastic, and they understand publicity, to be fair. And I was saying, what's the show about? And they said, well, this is the PR picture. It's a painter who's going to paint using kinesiology, is it, where the color of the music becomes the art. And I was like, wow, that's a pretty boring picture. And we get the artist throw in a bucket of paint at the cellist. That's what I said. And they said, why? I said, well, it's an artist with paint and cellist with the instrument. What? And I said, well, just go with it and we'll make it work. And then the artist was so up for it, and the cellist in the Zephyr Quartet was so excited. She got an old cello she could destroy, and I used my best photographer, Matt Turner, who's a wonderful, wonderful photographer in Adelaide, freelance now. You should employ him. multi-award winning. And he did this. So that was the front page of the Adelaide Advertiser and the top of their website the day the festival launched. And I got so many calls like, who's throwing paint? So that's the artist. So the funny attention to detail here, the cellist is not wearing blue clothes. That was the test run with blue paint. So that's why she's in blue. But you can see why, if you think about how far can we get this picture to go, tell the story. As they play music, she's going to paint. Okay, well, let's throw paint at the cellist. It's obvious to me, but it's an example of ideas, creativity, photographers thinking, picture editor, artist, festival. Everyone's involved in this. How do we make that work? I'd forgotten what the next slide is, so this is exciting. Right, so because we're in Melbourne, I thought I'd tell a footy story. I was really lucky enough for a couple of years to manage the photography of all the regional and communities for News Corp. This is a leader photographer. If you don't know what leader is in Melbourne, it was a group of free newspapers for every suburb, 26 of them, I think, at the time, that are just, I think, mainly digital only now. And they used to cover footy on a Saturday, 8 games a week, suburban football. You know, the fabric of Melbourne is the footy club. So Val Campen, this wonderful photographer, I decided at the start of the season, let's go off and shoot the game. And while we're at the game, let's shoot the people, the stories, the community. And we went, after 12 weeks, we looked at what we had and we showed the editors, and they loved it. And this ran in digital and print everywhere. And then the Herald Sun, who really looked down their nose at the leader, saw it and was like, wow, this was a center spread in the Sunday Herald Sun. But it's about visual storytelling, isn't it? It's about a photographer being smart, thinking an idea, and the notion that it's not just about a mark, a ruck, a footy player kicking a ball. That's not what footy's about. It's about the community. So the next one, I realize what's next, and it might be triggering if you're from Melbourne because it's about COVID. So sorry. But in Sydney, we had a second wave of COVID where southwestern Sydney was hit. If you're from Sydney, I'm sure you remember it. And I'm sure you all remember at the time, the pictures we were seeing were empty streets, the Premier talking at 11 a.m. or the Prime Minister talking, Scott Morrison at 12 p.m. It was this daily cycle of the most boring pictures and video. And so I decided, why don't we go and tell the diversity story of Western Sydney? Because it's actually about the people. And these people were still working, still getting the bus, and still trying to exist in their worlds and not let COVID, beat them. So I sent a photographer and a reporter out for 3 days to talk to people, and we got 25 portraits. And what matters to me most about this is about Sydney. This is a story about people, and the Daily Telegraph doesn't tell this story a lot. And for me, it's the most important part of the city. It's a very diverse, multicultural place where there's a Greek pharmacist, a Lebanese baker, a Korean taxi driver, a Chinese man who waters his plants, an African girl who's off to work. It was amazing. After 3 days, we knew we had this gold, really. And again, they were really supportive in the editor's world because they used it, and this was the main digital asset for about 3 days, because the COVID story was this, not empty streets. And last thing for me is the golden hour, which I mentioned earlier. Am I running way over? Yes. So the golden hour, this is Matt Turner again in Adelaide. So as a picture editor, you talk to your photographers a lot. how are we going to shoot the Cabaret Festival? I know there's a lot of art, so I apologize about that. So we had this American singer come out, and he photographed her on a hill as the sun rose above Adelaide. And then he filed this picture. He actually texted it to me, said, I think this is working. I said, oh, it's a fantastic picture. She had brought 3 dresses. He chose the red dress. He knew he had the green grass and the sunrise. So it was amazing. I knew it was going to be kind of front page. Then he got her on this swing to create energy in the picture. The sun's still rising. He's doing all these pictures. He's texting me. I'm going, Chris, amazing. Where did you get, how did you find the swing on the hill? Like, this is above Adelaide. If you know Adelaide, the Adelaide Hills looks across the city. It's beautiful. He said, oh, there was no swing. I just built one. And my mind was blown. I hadn't been involved in that creative process, but Matt had just pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed it to the point where he wasn't totally happy with, I mean, this is a fantastic picture, but he just wanted to get something else. And he put this on his Instagram. I was like, don't do that. But it just shows you, if you engage a photographer in the creative process, use the golden hour, light, lens, think anything's possible. I think anything is possible in photography. I'm going to skip that one. I'm going to leave you with this. 5 essentials if you brief a photographer. I don't need to read them, but it really helps if they know your story and what you're trying to say. It really helps if they know where the pictures are going. Always try and send a mood board, a visual device. Photographers don't do words, really. They do pictures. Send them links to Instagram people you like. Send them pictures they've taken themselves. That is something photographers really like, because they have it in their muscle memory. Oh, that's how I did that. Look at their website. Say, I like the way you did that. Tell them what is a must-have, but don't restrict them. So always say, I have to have this, but please don't just take that. I'm sure you've all employed photographers who just go and shoot what you tell them to do. And then you go, oh, why is that boring like that? Because I thought the photographer would go and create something. Tell them that and involve them early and talk logistics. And if you need props and all those things, talk about them, because they often are the things that make the picture. I'm not suggesting you go and build a swing on a hill as the sun rises, but you know what I mean. And have a plan B when it rains. I think I'll end there. I'll leave that slide up. Is that all right?
Great. Fantastic.
Awesome. Sorry. Thank you. Did he tell you to clap?
You've timed to perfection. We have actually at least 3 minutes for questions.
Oh, did I have a question slide? No. Oh, I had an AI thing. Don't worry about AI. Forget AI. Don't forget AI. Don't. Any questions? Anyone have a photography question or a?
I'm thinking about AI, and I guess, look, I'm curious because for a lot of, not really.
That's right.
Recording, will it help for your recording?
Yeah, just for the recording.
Oh yeah, that's a good point.
So I guess I'm asking, on behalf, so I'm not a marketer, I'm the video guy who spoke earlier, but from an AI perspective, I guess we've seen some presentations. Aaron from UNE showed, for example, how quick and easy it is to use AI to generate things. And my perspective in the audience is that's garbage. You can't use that. Like, but it is getting better, particularly with some of the sort of photorealistic sort of. What's your advice for marketers when they're approaching these things? Not so much about whether to use AI, whether to use a real photographer, but in terms of, well, how can they tell what is good? How does someone who is not a visual storyteller, a visual communicator, what are some of the ways they can understand whether something is actually good or whether, because a lot of people, they don't really know. They're like, I like it, but they have reasonably low marketers sometimes without a creative background can have reasonably low expectations for creative content and just love whatever you give them. How can people in this world of image abundance know whether a photo is good, evocative, powerful, etc.?
There was about 3 questions there. Right.
I'll simplify.
No, I got it. I'm going to say 3 things. The thing I said at the start, how you feel when you see it, that's quite important to me, because we are all so visually literate without us even knowing. We have this amazing camera in our pockets on our phones, and we are doom scrolling and we're looking at TikToks and Reels. And now there's a lot of negative to that. I get that. There's a lot of talk about what that means to the certain demographics, and I agree with all that. But it has created also this kind of, it's almost like a golden age of visual storytelling to me. If you concentrate on the 2% of quality, and when you see something, I think it was Tracy who was on before, said she did loads of screenshots. I do that constantly. I'm on Instagram and I'm like, look how good that is. That's just from my own kind of, how is that lit? What lens? So for me, people who don't know about visual storytelling probably really do know, but they need to work out what they like and what they want. AI is the horse has bolted. We're through the looking glass. We know it's here, right? We all use it every day, whether we know we are using it or not. But in text to image generation, we have to be very careful. And I think it was Joe Painter from Icon earlier, who I sat here for. She said AI is an amplifier, not a substitute for strategy. And she said authenticity is critical. Now, I think that's really, really important in photography, because I'll go to the slide I haven't shown. I'll show you this. This is in July, Guess Jeans ran in Vogue a campaign with an AI model. Now, the prompt engineer and the company that have created this are clearly very clever. I'll tell you what I will say. The prompt engineer company that have created this cost more than a photographer would have to create this. Now, it's brilliant. It is brilliant because it looks real, although to me, it's a particular type of bad in fashion. I won't get into that. This is their social media. Now, if you read down the right-hand side, they had about 3,000 comments or 2,000 comments, and they had about 10 positive comments. And they were being smashed for the lack of authenticity. And I think that's where you've got to think, are we going to use AI to go text to image generation, or are we going to use AI as a tool to make things faster, more productive? You might even use AI to create a mood board to show the photographer to create something. But I would suggest not telling your story of your university through an AI image of a student. That I think you'd find there'd be a bit of backlash to that. Does that answer your question?
Oh, I totally agree. I think universities need to remain authentic and true. So no, interesting. Thanks.
Yeah, I'll just follow up with Rob from UNA. We will never use AI generated strict policy in place. But the stuff that Aaron makes will never be seen.
Then what's the point of it though? Like it will never be seen.
That's for internal content.
Okay.
Yep.
But he was saying for using it for marketing. So that
Never gonna happen.
okay, well that's just what you're saying. So
created a debate in the room. That the sentence "we will never use AI" should have been applauded loudly, by the way. Next question. Yeah. Text image.
Yeah. So what we shot was internal comms.
Yeah,
or...
comms and occasionally like educational material, but never.
Yeah. You've got to tell stories, haven't you? You've got to tell authentic. I mean, the word authentic's been, I've only been in 2 sessions and it was thrown around like it was the golden egg. It is, though. It really is.
That was unbelievably brilliant. And
Oh, wow.
Just, I've been absolutely riveted the whole time, and your work obviously speaks for itself. But
Thank
I know
you.
you said you don't like standing behind the lectern and speaking, but you've absolutely got a knack for it. So
Thank you very
thank
much.
you. I just wanted to just applaud that for a moment. And my question is, as a marketer,
I'm going to turn that off.
I'm interested because you've given us this. This is a great slide to just pause on for a moment. You've given us 5 essentials for a photographer's brief. But as marketers, we're often briefing integrated campaigns, and we're briefing that into agencies, whether it's boutique or higher end, and they might then bring in a photographer. So I'm interested to get your perspective on how we think about that in the context of getting brilliant imagery, because often you don't have those types of people.
That's a great question, because while Tracy was showing those incredible videos from Western Sydney and Adelaide, I was watching them going, this is high-end video storytelling, that the still image is adjacent to it, for want of a better word. But I could see watching the videos, the picture, the powerful image. And I agree that you're often displaced from the conversation with the photographer. So there's an agency or someone else is doing the briefing, but I still think you're involved in that, in your brand values, what you want the story to tell, how you need to use it in social, all those things that you're going to have on your plate with the picture should come from the conversation you've had at the start. Now, I guess that if it's a big agency creating that amazing Adelaide advert, they would be involved in the still as much as you, but I think you should still be involved. I know that I'm not one of you, so I would love to be the photographer in that campaign and be involved early, because it's so good, and there's powerful still images that are as empathetic and powerful in that story. I mean, I was wowed by what Tracy was showing, to be honest. And I know the Western Sydney story really well, and I've met him, and he's an incredible man. But still, those stories are marketing campaigns, and sometimes you actually need to tell your story through alumni or whatever it is. They're real stories. What I mean by that is they're real pictures of real people. The word authentic today should be real, not AI. So I guess it's a landscape that's shifting constantly, and you're involved sometimes, you're not involved others. So I don't know. I would say get involved more.
Thank you. You've done a great job, Neil.
Wow.